Welcome back to Simplified on PowerDrift and welcome back to the Formula 1 Simplified series. Today we'll be talking about tires. I'm going to rewind the clocks back to 2011 because it was in that year that Pirelli, an Italian tire manufacturer, took over the sole rights as the only tire supplier for Formula 1. So basically, since 2011, each year teams get a standardized set of tires. Every year the tires do evolve, and the tires that were in 2011 are very different from the tires in 2023. But basically each year all teams get the same set of tires. But there is still a lot to talk about, so let's get started. Now firstly, you need to know that there are different sets of tires for dry conditions and different sets of tires for wet conditions. Let's start by talking about the dry tires first. Now the dry tires, they are known as the slick tires because there are no grooves on them. The reason there are no grooves is that slick tires have a larger surface area in contact with the road, and a larger surface area means more grip and you can go faster. Now the dry tires are split into 6 different compounds: C0, C1, C2, C3, C4, C5. Now C0 is the hardest tire and it tends to last the longest, but it also has the least amount of grip or the least amount of performance. So the C0 will be the slowest tire of the lot. C5 is exactly the opposite. It will have the most amount of grip, it will be the fastest around a lap, but it will also have the shortest lifespan. Now for any race weekend, Pirelli basically picks and chooses any 3 of these 6 compounds to make up the soft, the medium and the hard for each race weekend. For example, the C0 will be the hard, the C1 the medium and the C2 the soft. It could also be non-sequential, so you could have the C1 as the hard, C3 as the medium and C5 as the soft. Now basically what can happen is that across races you will see that sometimes the hard tire is actually the soft tire, and that's basically based on the track conditions. So if the track surface is very abrasive and the track conditions are very hot, you would tend to see Pirelli go for the harder set of compounds. So the C0, the C1 and the C2, for example, they could be slightly different as well. For tracks that have really nice grippy surface and ambient temperatures are fairly low, you would see Pirelli tend to go for the softer set of tires. This also depends on the track layout. If there's a lot more load on the tires, Pirelli will go on the safer side and go for the harder set of tires in their range. Basically, the 6 compounds allows Pirelli to pick and choose the perfect tire for each race weekend. But as a fan, you will still see the tires being coded as soft, the red, yellow the medium and white the hard. This is standardized across all races to make it easier for you as a viewer to see which tires the teams are using. Now teams actually have to be very careful in how they use their tires because they have a set number of tires that they get every weekend. They have a total of 13 dry tires per driver to choose from. From that 13, 8 are soft tires, 3 are medium tires and they get 2 hard tires to choose from. Now there is also a caveat here, and it's that each driver in the top 10 of the field must submit 2 sets of tires back to Pirelli after each practice session. There are 3 practice sessions in a typical weekend, so basically you will be submitting 6 tires back to Pirelli from your original 13. And that leaves you with just 7 when it comes to the qualifying and the race. Now if you imagine that teams tend to use 3 or 4 sets of tires in qualifying itself, that leaves a very small number in the race. And I must tell you here that in the race, as long as it is a dry race, teams are mandated to use 2 dry tire compounds. So for example, if I start the race on a medium, I must use either the hard or the soft as long as the conditions are dry. This is also where a lot of strategy comes into play. So teams can start on a hard tire and then go on for longer, while other teams pit for tires sooner because they might be running a softer compound, and because they're running longer they can then pit much later, put on a set of softs and then blast through the field. You can also see the opposite of this strategy is that they start on a soft tire, they make up that speed in the start and then they pit for a hard tire or a medium tire to carry them through to the end of the race. Some races are one-stop races, some races are two-stop races, some races are three-stop races, and that basically means 1 pit stop per team or 2 pit stops per team, or maybe even 3 pit stops per team. How this is decided is very complex. Teams run all sorts of simulations before they head into a race weekend. Pirelli does its own simulations and lets the team know the maximum number of laps each of the tire compounds can run, and based on that the teams can also decide their strategy. Now this, remember, is only for dry conditions. In the wet, or if it starts to rain in the middle of a dry race, this rule goes out of the window. You don't need to change your tire compounds in a wet race. And that brings me on to the wet tires. Now you have two types of wet tires. You have the green sidewalled intermediate tire and you have the blue wet tire or the extreme tire. Now the intermediate tire is basically for conditions where there is light rain and not too many puddles on the track. That is where intermediate is perfect for. Intermediate tires actually also perform fairly well in drying conditions or changing conditions. So if it's just starting to rain and someone puts on a set of intermediate tires, they might actually not be that much slower than a slick tire, and vice versa as well. So if the track was wet and it's now drying and you're running intermediate tires, they could still perform fairly well until the track is completely dry enough for slick tires. And that's not something that can be said for the extreme wets. Now the wet tires are rarely used in Formula 1 today because they are basically made for very heavy rain and conditions where there's a lot of puddles and standing water on the track. Usually what we see, especially in 2023, is that in these conditions, the race tends to be red flagged. And when the time comes for the safety car to be called off and go into the pits, it's already dry enough for intermediate tires. So the extreme wets are very rarely used in racing conditions, but they are still a very cool tire because my favorite fact about them is that they can disperse up to 85 liters of water per second. Yeah, those grooves are at work at dispersing the water and they do a great job of it. And you can see this practically happening when you see the cars drive on a wet part of the track and these really huge rooster tails of water are sprayed behind them. That's basically the wet tires, or actually even the intermediate tires, doing their job and dispersing water out of the way for maximum grip. Now if the forecast for a race weekend has rain in it, aside from those original 13 tires that we spoke about, they also get 4 sets of intermediate tires and 3 sets of wet tires. And if the entire weekend is forecasted to be rain, then they must use these 4 and 3 across the practice, qualifying and race. So it could put the teams in a bit of a pickle. And that's pretty much it. That's basically all you need to know about tires in Formula 1. You basically have a certain number of dry compounds for Pirelli to choose from. There are 3 chosen for each race weekend. And finally, if it starts to rain, you have 2 tire options, and that rule of changing the tires, that flies out of the window. And tires is where a lot of positions are lost and gained thanks to strategy. That's it for Simplified. That was a fairly long one, but I hope you liked it. Let us know in the comments below if you want any more Formula 1 topics to be covered on Simplified.